We continue our conference with a talk from Jiří Činčura, a software engineer at Microsoft. Jiří is .NET, C# and Firebird expert. He focuses on data and business lawyers, language constructs, databases, and performance. And today he will present a talk making boring old WinForms game fun and cool with latest .NET features and cloud. So please, welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Jiří Činčura, and in the next 40 minutes, I will be talking to you about a game that I wrote basically 20 years ago. So the title of my talk is Making Boring Old WinForms Game Fun and Cool with Latest .NET Features and Cloud. As I mentioned, my name is Jiří Činčura. If you want to follow what I'm doing and what's happening around me, you can go to fwdays'23.com, where you will find obviously some interesting stuff that I think is interesting and I need to put it out. But you can also find more about me, and you can find other ways to contact me in case you are going to have questions after the session or something like that. Also, a little notice, this is a pre-recorded session because sadly, as you are watching this session, I'm somewhere in the middle of Austria, probably going for my vacation. I will try to check your questions that were posted during the session, but I cannot promise too much. So in case you have a really burning question or something you want to have really answered, it's more like a question and less like a feedback or a comment. Just please feel free to go to my website, fwdays'23.com, find whatever communication channel works for you and send it my way. So let me immediately jump into the code. And as I mentioned, this game that I wrote is really, really old. I would say 20 years. And let me give you a little bit of history, how this actually happened. It was year 2005, and I know it was exactly 2005 because I subscribed into a class at the university. It was about .NET and CLR and other stuff, and I remember a couple of classes we spent digging into generics and enumerable and enumerator and all the stuff around it, because the generics were kind of the new thing. So I guess it was around the year 2005. And part of this class was also like a practice sessions with homeworks and other stuff. And at some point, we were doing something with WinForms and doing some simple programming and events and other stuff. But because I was kind of experienced with what we were doing, I was bored and I started doing something else. And the something else is basically the game that we have here today. So let me run it so you actually see what it's all about. It's a simple window and it draws a bunch of lines and connects them together. And your task is to drag these edges and put them in such a configuration that there is no crossing between the lines. As you can see, the game does not give you the indication whether you are done or not. I remember when I was writing it, I had like 2 hours. So this is like, well, the class was for 2 hours. I don't remember exactly whether I had 2 hours. I probably was doing the assignment initially. But once I was done and bored, I started doing something else to kill time. So let's say I have 1.5 hours. But I remember a couple of years later, I was doing another class, and it was about some mathematical stuff about like polygons and basically like shapes, and figuring out, hey, I'm inside. Am I inside? Am I outside? What is the easiest way to get to the border between these two objects? And if I go to the left, does it mean my left hand is inside or outside? And all these different algorithms. And it was really fun class because I thought that it was really a practical use of mathematics to apply into this one. And one of the algorithms that we were kind of studying through the lenses of the math, not through the lenses of programming language, but nonetheless, was basically figuring out whether you have, I think it's kind of closed or not closed, a polygon, basically meaning whether you have something like this. We were interested, do we have like a polygon that's like part of another polygon, which basically means it's crossing somewhere. And I remember at that time I was like, oh, that would be nice to update my game. I never did. I think I also never did it before because I was kind of expecting that math basically tells you, hey, check that these lines are parallel or that something, that there is an intersection or something. But once you start doing it with computers and lines, you immediately go into like rounding and rendering, and suddenly you figure out, you realize like the pixels are not aligning absolutely totally perfectly. So you need to have some buffers and boundaries and other stuff, and basically, hey, if it's less than 0.0001, that basically means it's touching because it's never going to be exactly 0, and so on and so on. So this is the game, and basically the task is to make it that there is no crossing between the lines and make it with as little moves as possible. The moves are shown in the title bar. And the first thing that I was really surprised in a positive way was that I took this code and I copy-pasted it into a fresh WinForms application that I have in here that's using basically .NET 4.8, but with all the stuff that we experienced with .NET 6 and .NET 7. I could use .NET 6, 7, and whatnot, but I use .NET 4.8 as the latest .NET framework that it's there. And then I just did a little bit of like fine-tuning. You can see that definitely in 2005, the Lambda expression were not a thing. So yeah, a little bit of like touching on the code to make it a little bit more succinct. The game itself is pretty easy. What I have is a list of points or array of points, and basically a method called drawGame that draws the lines and the circles so you can move these pieces. And then I have a simple event that when I'm beginning to move, when the mouse is clicked, and I'm checking whether I'm inside the boundary for the point, basically. If so, I remember the index. I say, hey, I'm moving, and that's basically it. So as the point is moving, I'm moving the coordinates, and I call invalidate, which basically means the draw is going to be, the game is going to be drawn again. If I lift the mouse, then I say moving false, and that's about it. So it's not a huge piece of code. I think at that time the biggest time-consuming part was like drawing the circles in a correct position and so on, because different like UI frameworks are drawing circles slightly differently and so on and so on. But anyway, if I run it, it's fine. I remember I spent countless hours trying to kill some time with this game. As you can see, it always draws a random character. Obviously, you can change the code, so it always draws the same structure. And with this one is using only 10 points. It's pretty easy. But once you go into like 40 or something like that, it becomes a little bit more difficult to like untangle this one. Probably it would be easier to have like full screen, but basically make it more difficult by making more points and possibly making a little bit bigger. But you know, this is a WinForms application. That's not cool. Desktop applications are not cool, and I want to update it. And I basically said, hey, what the .NET has to offer for me that would allow me to make it a little bit nicer. So obviously, being in WinForms, and I don't have anything against the WinForms. I think it's still the best way to create a Windows desktop applications, mostly because that's the only UI framework that I ever used extensively, and I kind of know my ins and outs. I never used WPF that much. I never used the universal Windows applications and Maui and other stuff. So that's the reason why I'm saying that the WinForms is basically the best one, because that's basically the only one that I know. But still, if I want to have this game for you, for me, for other colleagues, friends to play, this is probably not the best one to do it. Although I can take it, I can zip it and send it to someone and he can run it. It's still not going to be super nice. So what I did then, I said, well, okay, let's create it as a website, because now what I can do is pretty easily create a website even on Linux and run the game. So that's basically what I did. I created an index page, which is basically a canvas and a JavaScript file. Yes, a JavaScript file. I'm not super keen on JavaScript and other stuff, but I was pleasantly surprised that the code was more or less copy-paste. I copy-pasted it, and then in half an hour, it was working. It's not exactly the same stuff, but it was pretty easy. I didn't go into TypeScript and other stuff, and I'm pretty sure it would be probably a little bit easier. But again, for let's say 100 and something lines of JavaScript or C#, it's okay-ish probably to just write it this way. And yeah, I was surprised how close these languages are in terms of like working with basically algorithms. We are used to arguing about this language better than this and so on and so on. But what you realize is it's not about the language. The language is pretty easy. It's about the ecosystem around. If I would now want to connect to, let's say, MQTT broker, well, in .NET, I have all the features with like sockets and TLS and other stuff. With JavaScript on the browser, it will be a little bit different story. I can still use WebSockets and TLS and other stuff, but suddenly I don't have the full ecosystem of the .NET. But there is something that I would like to mention. I cannot replicate it because I already did, so it would look like a cheating. But maybe you know a tool that's called Copilot, GitHub Copilot. That basically is trying to guess what you are trying to write. As I was writing my code or changing the code, I had to create this method called draw circle. And this method creates the blue circle around the point where you can drag and drop. And one problem that I experienced is that first of all, the API for drawing on a canvas is slightly different. And then drawing the circles or arcs in WinForms, and sorry if I switch the story or switch the fact a little bit, I don't remember exactly. In WinForms, when you are drawing a circle, you are specifying a center point and then the arc, basically. With the canvas, you are specifying top left point, if I'm not mistaken, and then you are drawing an arc. Again, this is a simple math. Basically, you just need to shift it and do the other stuff. But as I was writing it, I remember the Copilot, basically when I created the draw circle signature, it immediately offered me the method. And now I realized that the Copilot is actually pretty interesting. I can try to do it, but obviously because I already did and the method is already there, it's just going to be not super interesting. So what I did is, and you can see it's now trying to tell me, hey, maybe you want to draw a text because you already have a line and you have a circle. So maybe you want to draw a text. But for me, I was trying to draw a circle. And you can see it's guessing what the next thing is going to be. And you can say, hey, it's the same stuff as above. Yes, that's exactly what it is. But it's kind of like offering me what should be there. And in this case, it's exactly the same code as it's above. But when I started, first of all, it offered me the full method. And it was more or less correct. I don't know whether it was absolutely correct or not. but it was there, and I was surprised that it was like working nicely. So that's a cool technology, and I realized that it's probably not about your primary language, something you are doing day in, day out. Because if I turn it in my libraries, in my daily code in the C#, it's usually not offering me super helpful code. It's something that I could write really, really easily without waiting for it or without looking at the screen. I can just keep typing and it will be faster. Or it's so difficult that it has no idea what I'm actually doing. But it's not about it. It's about, hey, if I need to switch into the JavaScript, if I need to switch into Python, if I need to switch into, I don't know, Perl, something that I'm not super familiar with, I still know my ins and outs, but there might be these small differences between how something is computed, how something works, what's the name of this class, like math.py and other stuff. I can find it, I can Google it. I will be just slightly slower. With the Copilot, I will be, I would say, at the same speed as I am in a C# where I know every piece and every corner I ever need. So that was pretty nice. But you know, I can run it and, oops, wrong screen. And this way. And it works, kind of. So I can move it and I can play with it, but it's still kind of rough. You know what I mean? It's I ported the WinForms into the browser, and that's about it. And then I said, well, what next? This is really not super interesting. Yes, I can now run it. I have the Kestrel, I have the web server. I can package the application, send it to somebody else, but it's still more or less the same. And the biggest problem I have with like me programming the website is that I don't want to be in a JavaScript playing with the DOM and changing DOM and adding button here and a new button there and dynamically creating the UI. I think nobody likes to do this. That's why we have all of these different JavaScript frameworks and UI frameworks and so on and so on. But I want to stay in a .NET in JS world as long as possible. So what I have in here is something that's called Blazor. So let me set it as a startup project. And the Blazor, what it's actually doing is using C# and WebAssembly as a way to create your website or your web application. So what I have in here is basically a piece of HTML. You can see there's a button and there's a break and there's a canvas. But there's also the canvas after this condition that basically says, hey, is the game enabled? Yes, no. If not, then I don't want to see the canvas and whatnot. And then I have a bunch of code that's basically doing the same stuff. It's doing a little bit more. I will get into this in a minute. But what is interesting is that it's basically a .NET code using the game logic. So this is the begin move, and this is exactly the same stuff. It's copy-paste of the original code with some minor tweaks, but I still save the index and I still say, hey, I'm moving. And then if I am done moving, I will just set it to false. And if it's moving, I just call a method called doMove. I will give it a game ID, a little bit more about that, and the index and the X and Y coordinates. The only problem for me is that I'm actually using something that's deeply integrated into the HTML. I have canvas and I'm basically drawing something on the canvas. And this is the place where Blazor is not going to help me, because Blazor is good if I'm creating like HTML elements and putting them in there and doing some interaction, validation, moving, lifting, hiding, and so on and so on. But still, I have most of my game logic back in C#. I have a little bit of stuff around here that's for the future. You can ignore it. And then I have a small interaction between the games. So if I go into my HTML file, you can see that I have a few methods that I need to be able to call. So I have this init game and I have this draw game, and the draw game is doing the same stuff as was the previous code doing. It's drawing the lines and the circles. As I mentioned, this is not where the Blazor is going to be any helpful because I'm deeply in HTML and canvas stuff. So the rest is basically the same. It's again clear canvas, draw a line, draw a circle, same stuff. I just copy pasted it, and that's what it is. If I would create it from different elements instead of drawing on canvas, I would maybe have less JavaScript whatsoever. And then I'm also calling back into the Blazor. So what I have here is the invoke method async, and I am calling the point begin move, moving, and end move is in here. So I'm basically calling back into a Blazor. And as I mentioned, Blazor is really interesting because it is a UI, let's call it a UI framework. It's running on web, but it's using WebAssembly. This kind of like a universal language that we can use. So I can still stay in the C#. And obviously, it's not only this, you can do a lot more. But this is really, really interesting. So let me just quickly check what is happening in my settings. Should be okay. So let me run it. Again, wrong window. And it says unhandled error. Okay, something else. Oh, I think I know what it is. It is this server address. Let me check that one. Yes, and I think this is not correct. I think we need to have this one as well running. So let me set it as startup. And five, 2, 2, 4. Yes. Okay, let me put back the Blazor. And now it should be okay. Okay, so there it is. So now it's loaded. You can see that I added a huge improvement in the UI. Well, at least for my design skills, I created a text box and a button that allows me to load any game. We'll go into that in a second. But basically what I can say is test and say load game. And it loads me the game with the identifier test. Oops. Why is browser not cooperating with me? You know what I want to do? I want to make it slightly bigger. I'll do it this way. And again, I can just start moving these points and have fun with this. And again, if I reload it, there's no other stuff in UI. I type test and it loads the game for me. So this allowed me to minimize my expose to JavaScript and to basic and HTML to the minimum, because what I'm creating and what I'm using is a bunch of components, Razor pages, and I don't have to fiddle with these like small stuff left and right. I'm just using what's enabled and what's provided for me. So normal C#, I have all the power of the C# that's available. Obviously, I'm still running in WebAssembly in the browser, so I'm constrained by the environment. I cannot, let's say, allocate like 15 gigabytes of RAM, and because I'm running in WebAssembly, it's not like super fast compared to running on bare metal, but still, it's running in browser. I don't need an executable. It just loads, and that's about it, and I'm doing it in C#. So if you have a lot of logic, a lot of validation, a lot of business logic, and basically like a line of business application, then the Blazor is absolutely a great fit. What I would like to point out is that on this button, I have this on-click load game. And what this load game is doing is checking some stuff, initializing the game, yada, yada, yada. And then it has explicitly calling here state has changed. I need to call it explicitly because I am changing it in here, and I need to load it. I need to load the canvas immediately. Normally, when you are changing the UI, it like kind of happens automatically, but I'm pretty sure you saw Blazor, or you can check like the basic demos on the Blazor. But as I am setting this into a true, I'm not doing any modification with the HTML. Just because the property changed, the canvas was rendered onto the UI. It's not like I was reloading the page or something like that. It was just, it shows there, and it's running completely on the client. Let me run it again and show you a small piece that's actually happening. So if I look into my network and reload it, you can actually see there's a Blazor WebAssembly.js and other stuff now, because I'm running into the debug and stuff. There's like the hot reload and other stuff. But basically it says, hey, it loaded 10.38 megabytes of resources, in this case from cache. And again, I'm running in debug and other stuff. If you publish your application, everything is like way smaller. But I'm running completely client side. Once I get all these like DLLs and other stuff, I'm done, and I don't have to worry about being connected. It's completely running client side, which is pretty nice, because it suddenly allows me to have like fully client-side application without me learning another UI framework in JavaScript or whatever else might be hot today. As I mentioned, WinForms, good for me. Then I kind of skipped everything and went to HTML, or I think I knew HTML even before WinForms, but I mean like pure HTML. So as far as I can use just a pure HTML, I can find my way around. If it becomes CSS, it becomes a little bit more difficult. Definitely don't ask me how to center div left and right and left and top and bottom and other stuff. But the HTML is kind of like the universal language, so that's fine. And if I can create a decent UI in it, or maybe even a game, then that's absolutely fine with me. So, well, I have a web-based application with most of the logic still in a C#, and I can play it. But as you can see, there's a little bit more happening in here. And the reason why a little bit more is happening in here is that I actually wanted to be able to play it with other people. The original game, you just started your WinForms application and you challenge basically yourself. You can have the fastest time, lowest number of moves, and so on and so on. It's up to you. But what I actually created is an option to play with other people, kind of a multiplayer game. So what I have in here is a website that I was actually starting before that is using another cool technology that you can use in .NET, and it's called SignalR. And SignalR basically allows me to use WebSockets to do a bidirectional communication between connected parties, between clients. And I'm pretty sure you saw the demos where you can create a chat and other stuff. But what I wanted to do is basically have an application that allows me to send these moves to some central location, and the central location then distributes it into a different browsers or different clients, and we can kind of like play together. So that's what I did. This website is basically the same stuff as before. The only difference is that it's using this game hub. And this game hub has three interesting methods. Start game, that basically it's going to create like the layout and send it to all the connected clients. Then start move, so we actually see that some movement is happening and it's happening real time. And then do move, that finishes the move completely. And that's about it. And at the end, it's always sends refresh the game. So let me make sure that it's always running these two together. So let's do the Blazor and signal R. Now, if I run it, and again, it opens in the wrong window. So let me fix that. I have now the web-based version, the same as before, and then the Blazor version. The web version immediately starts a new game and gives me some identifier. So if I copy-paste it into a Blazor, it loads the same layout, the same game. And then I can take a point and I can start moving, and I immediately see it on the other side. So now we have a multiplayer game. And the only thing that was needed was a couple lines of code, and I will show you what's happening in there. So let me close this. So the backend part is pretty easy. I just derive from this hub and create, in my case, game hub. Then I have a bunch of methods. Doesn't really matter what it is. It's just a bunch of methods that I can call from the client or from other parts on my server. And I can pass whatever arguments I need. And then I have this client's object. And this client gives me an option to send it to all clients, only to caller, and then all except and clients, and do some little bit of filtering. In my case, I'm using groups. And the groups are the groups for the game. So if like 5 games are being run, I'm only sending the new points into the game that's actually run. This is the ID that I'm actually sending inside, and it's also the ID that's in the URL. On the code side, it's pretty easy because the only thing I need to call is this map hub method. So I just say, hey, there's a game hub on this URL. It's implemented by this one, and that's about it. From the code point of view, I still have my old JavaScript code as part of this project, but I also created this communication.js. And as you can see, I'm not using any modules, classes, or whatever you want to use. I'm just like old school spaghetti code, everything, well, not everything in one file, but mostly like one after each other, and I don't care. And I installed a Signal R JavaScript client library. So that's what I have in here using npkg. And what I basically say, hey, connect to the game hub in case something fails, just automatically reconnect. I don't care. And then I just call build, and it gives me this connection. So then I call start on the connection. When I get the refresh game, I call on refresh game, which is a callback I'm getting inside. Basically, it does whatever needs to be done. And then I call the start game. This start game is the same as this start game, and then you can see I'm passing the ID, and that's about it. When the move happens, I call start move, and so on and so on and so on. And in my JavaScript code, well, if we do the, for example, the begin move, in the begin move, I call start move, basically saying, hey, somebody took the point and it's starting to move it. And same stuff, if the point is moving, I'm calling the do move. And the do move is this do move or start move that's doing and communicating with the Signal R. So there's a lot of messages being sent through the WebSockets to allow me to have a real-time communication between these connected clients. So let me run it again and show you a small, again, wrong window, or not a wrong window, wrong screen. Let me fix that. So now I have the game, and what I want to do is put it here and create another window. Hopefully it will fit. Well, almost. Now it's a different identifier, so let me copy paste it in here. And now if I start moving, it's moving in all the windows that are connected, and I can start doing this one. Would this be like an in-person online session? I would publish this into something that's publicly accessible. and I would ask you to start playing maybe more points, and we would see it moving. So if I move it from this location and this location, it's moving in all of the windows basically. But you know, I'm not saving anything in this application. So if I start it again, and it will probably start again in the wrong. There it is. And if I do, for example, test, it loads some shape. And if I close the application and if I restart it again and go into the test, it will, let me make sure that it's actually restarted. Then it will load again something that's completely random because it's not being stored, or at least I think it's not being stored unless I kept the old configuration in there. So what I did next is, well, it would be nice to be able to either backtrack the steps, so kind of save the different moves, and also play the game again, because it might be, hey, there is a faster way to do it, so I want to challenge myself again. So that basically means with every move, I need to store the information. And again, I can run it on my machine locally and publish it into the website, but I would like to be able to scale slightly differently. So what I did is that I created basically a simple function, Azure function, that's saving the game, loading the game, and so on and so on. In this case, I will focus on storing the game. And I know that there will be a lot of traffic. There's already a lot of traffic on the WebSocket, but given that I will be storing a lot of stuff, and yes, I can do it a little bit more intelligently than what I'm doing here, that basically saying, hey, this is the current state, save it. I could start saving diffs or have some kind of like a queue and other pieces. But anyway, one way or the other, I need to be able to store a lot of data. And if it's running on my on-premises server, then storing it somewhere might be difficult. Locally, definitely, I need to back up and other stuff. So I decided, hey, I will put it into the cloud. So I'm storing it in the blob storage, which is super cheap, super fast, super reliable, durable. And I created this Azure function. The reason why I created this Azure function is that it allows me to scale. Basically, it allows me to have a number of servers that is needed to be able to handle the load. So if there is nobody playing, there will be no servers and no charge. If there's 1,000 people playing, there will be, I don't know, 20 servers, and it will handle the load, hopefully fine, unless I make a mistake in my code. And the same story applies to my WebSockets. If you ever try to handle WebSockets, it's fine if you have 10, 15, maybe 20 WebSockets. But once you go into like hundreds and thousands of WebSockets being open, it's not super easy, mostly because you can easily exhaust resources on the server, and it's also difficult to keep them open all the time. So for example, if I would redeploy my application, all the WebSockets will be closed. Obviously, clients would reconnect back, hopefully resume the game, but it would not be the super nice experience, especially if I would like disable the gaming board or something like that. And then I might be having problems once all, let's say, 10,000 clients starts to reconnect. It will hammer my server. It will be probably a little bit heavy on my server, especially if I would like to publish it into something smaller and just use the cloud as like handle the heavy load. So what I can do is actually use the Signal R in the Azure. So that's what I did in the last project, or second to last project that I have in here. And what I have in here is called @SignalR, and also @Azure Signal R, and I provide a Signal R connection string. In this case, the client is actually not being connected to my server, it's being connected to the Azure, so I don't care how they scale it, whether they handle thousands and 10,000s or millions of connections. That's really not my business. And in the best case scenario, the only worry I have is, well, I just need to scale up or something like that, or it will do it automatically, even better. So that means that I'm actually now just serving the HTML, doing the initial handshake to provide, hey, instead of connecting to me, connect to the Azure, and storing and loading the game is done through the Azure function again in Azure, so I don't have to worry about it. So the experience will be the same. For the sake of time, I'm not going to run it. The only thing that I will also show you is that, let's say I want to take this application and why is it preferring that screen? And I would like to publish it somewhere and make it a little bit bigger. So as I mentioned, I would probably be able to publish it into the cloud as well. Then I have the WebSockets being handled by cloud, the storing and loading the games will be handled by the cloud, and obviously handling my game. But I might say, well, what if I want to have it kind of like locally for some reason, and only the heavy part, like the WebSockets and like the storing and loading, would be done in the cloud. So what I can actually do is that's about it. I can call .NET Publish and say, hey, I would like to publish it into the Linux ARM. And the reason why I'm doing this is that I can then take this one and put it on, for example, Raspberry Pi. And let me copy paste this one. If I go, oops, not correct. Why is it not copy pasting everything? I know there's a space because it's formatted. Good old Notepad. Fix that. And now I can take and deploy this application to my Raspberry Pi. But as you can see, there's again a lot of files. And I want to copy it over SCP onto my Raspberry Pi and run it. So I will do another small trick, and it will be publish single file equals true. And now it will have just a single file. Well, almost just a single file. There's a JSON for the libraries. I don't need that. PDB, I don't need the PDB for debugging, so I can delete that. Now I have one file and obviously www with static files like the JavaScripts and CSS files and other stuff. So now I can take the directory and the executable, copy it into the Raspberry Pi, run it, and I have everything up and running. And even if somebody needs it, like run it locally, they can just run the binary, and the rest of the heavy lifting, let's say, like the WebSockets and the storing and loading, is still handled in the cloud. So with that, I'm kind of running heavily out of time. This is all I have for you today. For me, it was definitely fun playing with a code that was 20 years old and improving it and moving it into, let's say, 2023. So to give you the summary, we moved it to web using the Blazor. Then we used WebSockets to have like a multiplayer game. We stored the game so they're actually somewhere that you can look at the history or the result or start again using the Azure functions, and we stored it into the Azure Blob Storage for like absolute durability. So it's never going to be lost, well, unless somebody clicks badly in the portal and deletes something or something like that. So I'm out of time. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them to me directly. I will also try to check later when I have time And when I arrived at my final destination, the conference chat, and if there is something that catches my eye and it's still kind of open for responses, I will try to respond there. With that, thanks for watching, and hopefully see you next time.